Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we're taking a look at the new weather changes on the Battle for Azeroth Alpha. And this is going to be a very interesting change for me, something I've been looking forward to for a very long time, something they've now dubbed Weather 2.0, although there are a few caveats to what you're seeing in the video. We're going to take a look at multiple different zones that now seemingly contain pretty intense weather, talk a little bit about some of the parameters and some of the things that you could expect going forward with this feature. So the first thing you're going to notice throughout this video is that I'm going to have the console open. It's a whole different discussion, but if you don't know how to open the console, I would definitely look up a guide on how to do so. It's quite easy, but it can show you some very pertinent information for what we're checking out here, especially with weather. And that's kind of the main thing we're looking at in this video is the different weather that exists throughout the world and the intensity of such. So I had this discussion a couple times now with a couple different people. People aren't necessarily sure, first of all, if what I'm showing is even any different than it is in Classic or any other version of the game like Legion. And the reason that that may be confusing is because at some point in the game they changed the default, I think it's called weather density console command, to 1, or maybe it's 0, I don't know, but it's the lowest, whatever the lowest integer is, down from 3. So at some point in the game there was a feature in the actual menus where you could change the weather intensity. They removed that, and whenever they did that, I think it might have been Cataclysm, they changed the weather density to the lowest setting by default. So people simply wouldn't get annoyed by it, and they could change it if they want to. But I think 90% of the people who play this game don't know you can actually change it. So it's in the files, you could do it with the console command, etc. But now back on Battle for Azeroth Alpha, it's on 3, which is the highest by default again. So one way or the other, there's a lot of rain and a lot of weather. Any weather that is happening is much more noticeable. And I could still change that if I wanted to. It would make, no matter how intense the weather or whatever weather pattern it is, it would make it pretty much non-existent. But the fact that they've gone back to that being default is a notable change, something we should discuss. Another thing we're going to discuss right now, especially you'll see, is just how each area might interact with weather. So for example, in Thunder Bluff, it's clearly raining, but directly outside of Thunder Bluff, in Mulgore, it's not actually raining. And, you know, with the use of the console command, you could clearly tell the difference. We're looking at the weather element of the console where it says change weather to 1. That's the no rain, no weather at all. 2, I believe 2 is rain. I think 3 might be snow. Then there's like 4, I think it's sandstorm, etc. And then there's all the new ones that have been added in BFA, which we'll talk about at the end of the video. But regardless, I think weather is a very important part of the world. I do think atmospheric, like the atmospheric elements of the game are something that really keep people interested in it. And a lot of people will cite that Classic, having this weather as such a potent element is something that's really important. There you see, now in Fairless, I'm highlighting over the weather element there. It's actually significantly more intense than the first two. So take a note throughout the video or rewind or something like that to see the different intensity, or however it's notated. I can't exactly remember what the word, I think it's intensity, but regardless, the weather throughout the entire game, now all in the old zones, has a different variance. I don't know exactly if that means it can vary day to day, or if it's like per zone, it will vary. For example, it's quite rainy in Fairless. Actually makes quite a lot of sense. Fairless is a jungle. Makes more sense to be more, see these clouds that were coming in. This is like the next step up in intensity for weather. I believe this is new with Battle for Azeroth, although again, I'm not 100% sure, so if you know otherwise, let me know. But yes, I believe that this is unique for Battle for Azeroth, part of the new weather system. And the fact that we are a notch ahead of the previous zones means that this extra raindrops and these clouds make the zone that much more, wet, more rainy. And like I said, that is going to be very noticeable, but maybe it's only because it's Fairless. We don't know exactly how the system's going to work. We may never know, frankly, unless you do like some kind of deep dive into the system yourself. But frankly, the weather is welcomed, if you ask me. I think it's something that we've been missing. And like I said, it's never actually gone away from the game, but the fact that they're kind of pushing the game as a default back towards this, yet another thing in a long list of changes that making the game more like Classic and less like, say, Kata or WoD or MoP or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so many at this point. The list is getting really outstandingly long, and it's kind of impossible not to say that they want this. But another thing you're going to notice here as I'm flying around, and hopefully you've noticed already, is that the part of the change here is that the weather is now adapting to the speed at which we're traveling and the camera itself to make it more realistic. If you played Classic, especially recently, you'll really draw a harsh conclusion from the old systems being very basic. It was basically just an animation of water falling from the sky with no dynamic elements to it whatsoever. And that people are saying that this is not even finished, that this is not actually Weather 2.0. This is still Weather 1.0 or whatever, but with just some new elements. People are saying that the actual the new weather system is actually changing the like the pixels and the color and the animations of the weather too. And we can see that pretty clearly at the end of the video in the island that we're going to show off. But again, we see in Zanger Marsh another version of rain, although much less intense than the previous one. So now we've seen 3 different versions of rain, but this is all still using the old looking raindrops. Although, of course, I have nothing to compare it to, but I believe that, you know, if somebody were to say that this is not any different than it was in the old version of the game, the raindrops themselves, that is, I would probably agree. And really the only change that I notice is the varying intensities and the fact that it reacts to the camera depending on where you are. If you're moving forward, it comes at you, etc. Makes it look a lot more realistic. Now what you're going to see next is the first really big outlier of it. There's going to be 3 more clips that I want to definitely talk about. And this is going to be a very intense snowstorm. This is in a place in, it's where right next to the Sons of Ho Deer dailies. And you'll remember this quest if you played in Wrath. But now I don't know if this is like this on live, but very, very, very snowy. It seems like a 100% chance to have this type of snow. And now this is the first time we've seen the intensity as a whole integer, as 1.0 that is, or higher. And previously, before, people who were studying this topic said that it was never ever anywhere close to 1.0 or higher, and that this is a new thing with BFA and a step forward in terms of weather. And as you can see here, it is affecting the screen quite heavily. And now I believe that this is Weather 2.0. How the snow is more like a ball, clearly a higher fidelity than the raindrops that we showed earlier. This is the only snow example I can get, although on the live stream from yesterday, I did manage to get some snow in Dunmurrow when I was flying around. But unfortunately, the live stream is taking forever to render, so I couldn't get the footage from that for this video. I need to get this made, but if you want to check that out, you can. The beginning, like the first 20 minutes of the stream from yesterday, the me soloing dungeon stream, is it's got some weather exploration in it as well. But as you see, extremely intense snow, really affecting the screen to the point where it's very noticeable. Something that anybody who liked weather in the past would definitely, I think, would recommend that this is a good thing. And now here's another peculiar one. This is actually unique to this phased area of, it's kind of like a scenario type area right outside of Orgrimmar. This is setting us up for the Legion intro, the scenario that would lead us to the Broken Shore with all the random NPCs and stuff. And it's actually raining in this phase, but not directly out of it, either in Orgrimmar or in Durotar. If I went to Orgrimmar or to Durotar, it would stop raining. So very peculiar. I think this is another very interesting thing that I learned about weather, is that it does seem to vary based on maybe phase or subzone, something like that. In terms of the zones themselves, it doesn't seem to change too much. But when you have something like this, that's obviously from a different time frame, different expansion, different phase, it does seem that it has the possibility to change. And frankly, I don't think I've ever seen it rain in Durotar, even in Classic. So very unique looking. It's a very light rain yet again. And this is all going to be in contrast with this final clip that I'm now going to show you. We're going to see an island, which clearly is demonstrating Weather 2.0, and we're going to see a sandstorm effect. So unfortunately, not one of the most prolific ones on the islands. If you guys have done the islands, there's been a couple. I think blizzard, like a really big blizzard, a red ash type storm. That's for like the fire elementals, the water ice elementals. That's the blizzard. And then we have these earth elementals spawning a earthquake type ability. It's just causing a sandstorm. So sandstorm is actually something that's in the game. It's actually in Silithus and Teneris, although I don't know if it's still in Teneris after the Cataclysm changes, but I couldn't get it to spawn a sandstorm in either of those zones, so I wasn't able to show that off in this video either. But as you see here, this is, again, 1.0 intensity, just like the snowstorm that we saw in Storm Peaks, and this is clearly affecting the screen. Not only affecting the screen, clearly interacting with the camera, clearly, obviously, a new element of the video game. This has never been something that's been in the game before, and it's quite noticeable. enforceable. So I'm really taking it in here, taking a look at it. But one way or the other, I think stuff like this is welcomed in the game, if you ask me. I would very much like to see this. So basically what we've seen in this video is like different types of weather. You know, there's multiple types. There's, you know, rain, snow, sandstorm, perhaps even other things that we didn't get to show. And then there's varying types of intensity. So what we don't know yet, currently, hopefully this will be a topic for discussion for you guys, is the intensity random or is it specific to the zone? For example, is 1.0 only ever going to happen on this island or like perhaps in the Storm Peaks area, the very thematic Storm Peaks area? Has this been happening previously? Am I kind of making this sound like it's new, but it's not actually new? Just changed slightly? I don't know. It's difficult to test, frankly, because weather is so infrequent in live WoW. Definitely, I would say definitely changes the fact that weather is a lot more frequent on the alpha. Basically, this all was recorded within 2 to 3 hours. I just flew through all these different zones, and I mean, you can see the timer up in the top screen there. I just flew through a couple zones in a couple hours, and we found plenty of weather. And there was plenty that I didn't include as well. So, and then, of course, does this intensity actually change much, and what would you want to see about the intensity in the game? So for me, I think whether like the intensity 1.0, which is clearly like, you know, 1.0 being the integer, of course, still talking about weather 2.0 in the colloquial terms, whether, you know, the intensity 1.0 integer, I quite like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Don't go into the portal if you're fighting those guys, apparently you die. Anyway, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I quite like just how vibrant and strong the weather actually feels. And it feels a lot more like real world. Like if you're in a sandstorm, you're not really going to have like a weak sandstorm that's not going to affect your eyes and the way you perceive the game or the world that you're in, of course, IRL, you know. And I'd say the same thing about, you know, harsh weather, like rain or maybe a storm, a snowstorm, something like that. It's going to dramatically affect the way you interact with the world. And I think stuff like this, more realism, more kind of fidelity of the world, kind of immersion is something that is definitely a well-needed thing in the game. So I hope to hear your guys' comments on this. Hopefully you guys will have some input on this. If you know anything about weather, let me know. Otherwise, let me know how you feel about it and your expectations of the system. And if you're from the future, let me know what's changed so I could update this video. But anyway, thanks for watching. Very interested in this, and we'll see you guys in the next one.